This week I got exclusive access to the latest build of Planet Coaster 2, and in that got to have a play with the drop tracks, switch tracks, turntables, tilt tracks, all sorts. It was absolute madness. I've already made videos talking about everything new I found in my gameplay experience, and also all of the new coaster models, flat rides and transport rides that are going to be in Planet Coaster 2. They are listed in the description if you want to check them out after this video. But in this video I'm going to give you a quick gameplay overview looking at these drop tracks, switch tracks, tilt tracks and all the other tracks in the game, and more importantly, how do they work? Let's get into it. Currently there are only a few coaster types in the game that can use these features. The two multiverse coasters can use the drop tracks and switch tracks. These two can also use the different trick track elements. The Mack Power Splash coaster also has the ability to use these turntables, and obviously the tilt coaster has the opportunity to do a tilt track. But the Intamin Multiverse model also has its own variation on a tilt track too. But for this gameplay I'll be using the Intamin family coaster to show off the drop track, tilt track, turntables, trick tracks, all of the above. Firstly, let's look at the drop track. On this Intamin family coaster there is two different types of drop track that you can use. The first one will drop the train and then the train will exit in the same way it's entered, going forwards. And with the second one, once the train has completed its drop, it will exit backwards instead. The drop track element also naturally brakes at the top, so you don't really have to put brakes before this element if you don't want to. And the bottom of this drop track element also acts as a launch as well, which you can customize the settings for how powerful or how fast you want this launch to be. There's also an opposite version too, which can raise the train up to the track above, whilst doing a little bounce too. You can also set the time you want for it to take until the drop happens, the time taken until the train is released and launched off at the end, or change the time in which the entire sequence takes place over. Now I was told that all of these different special track elements are still currently being worked on, so this is not the final product. There's a few visual glitches which you'll see later, but for the most part it's just so satisfying to see something like this work in game, and I can't wait to experiment with this further once I get my hands on the full game at release. That's about it for the drop tracks. I'm still yet to try any of the more crazy things like doing a drop track into a drop track into a drop track, which I'm sure will probably work pretty well, but I'll leave that for you to have a play around with once you get the full game. Next is onto switch tracks, and these have been really well implemented. They basically operate like the switch track does at the end of 13 at Alton Towers, where you approach the switch track one way, slow down on this piece of track, the track switches over behind you, and then you launch out backwards out of the element, or depending on which way you enter it, it could be forwards, because this coaster goes forwards and backwards, so you could enter this switch track element backwards, launch out forwards, or the other way around. Just from this coaster model, it doesn't really look like they operate in a more traditional way that switch tracks work, by which I mean like on an Intamin Blitz coaster where the switch track moves over to allow for a rollback. But obviously this is an Intamin family coaster, so it doesn't really have that style of element. So if we were to get an Intamin Blitz later down the line in the game, or at launch or through a DLC, hopefully this different type of switch track will be implemented too. Similarly to the drop track, this works in the same way, of which there are two variations, one where you exit to the left and one where you exit to the right. It works quite intuitively similar to the drop track actually, where you place the element down and then it immediately gives you the option to place track coming from the other side of it. And there's no need to try and line that track up as well, it just works perfectly. Again, you can customize the launch release speed on this, just like the drop track, and the time it takes for the actual train to launch backwards too. Next, let's look at turntables, and I'll demonstrate this both on the Intamin family coaster and the Mack Power Splash. Just like the drop tracks and switch tracks, there's different variations of how this turntable element can work, whether it turns you clockwise, counterclockwise, 90 degrees to the left, 90 degrees to the right, or can spin you all the way around too. This has been really well implemented, I have to say, and it just opens up so much more possibilities as to what you can do with these different types of coasters. It's going to make layouts so much more interesting from now on. And as you can see here, yes, there are a couple of visual glitches, but I'm assuming this will get ironed out before the game launches. But I will say that the actual core movement of the element does work perfectly. Next is the tilt track, and this appears both on the Intamin Multiverse coasters and on the Vekoma tilt coaster. This is such a cool looking element, especially on the Vekoma tilt coaster. It's been integrated so well. After years of wanting these types of elements on coasters in Planet Coaster, it's pretty surreal seeing them work this well. First, I'll show you on the old gen Vekoma tilt coaster, which I have to say I would like a new gen one of these as well. I'm assuming it wouldn't be too difficult just to reskin the track and the trains on this, because the actual model of the tilt track mechanism itself looks perfect. Similarly to the drop track, switch tracks and turntable elements, you can change the timings of this element too. And seeing it work on both types of coasters, minus a few visual visual bugs is just so exciting. Our coasters now are just going to be so much more like thrilling and interesting than they've ever been before. And if they can do it on these type of coasters, I'm sure in the future we'll get more that can do it too. And last but certainly not least, we have the different trick track elements, which are exclusive to the Outer Max Multiverse coasters. These are just pure fun. I had to mess around with all the different options that we've been presented with, and I had to say I had a great time. There's a few different variations of omni-arm movements, and like different variations between drop tracks and tilt tracks and turntables. There's just so much going on here. Unfortunately, I didn't have the most time to go through these, as I wanted to include everything that I've spoken about in all 3 of these videos I've made from a Planet Coaster 2 hands-on experience, but it was just so fun messing around, and I feel like that's what most people are going to do with this coaster model the second they get the game. Just have a play around and see all of these new amazing possibilities that we can do with these elements. And it makes me very happy that Frontier have put all of this effort in to create such unique and interesting elements on the coasters as well. If you'd have asked me a few years ago after playing Planet Coaster 1, I wouldn't have really thought this stuff was possible in the Planet Coaster engine and in the Planet Coaster world, but seeing it like this work near flawlessly is just really exciting. These work pretty much exactly the same way as the drop tracks, tilt tracks and turntables work, where you just place them down, the track automatically connects to the end of the element, and then you can change stuff like release speed, timings, all that stuff. And it's great to see that the mechanics of these elements have really been taken into consideration as well. Like, they're quite small and compact, meaning that we can theme up this whole ride mechanism in such an interesting way. And that's it from me. You've seen all the different tilt tracks, drop tracks and trick track and turntable elements that Planet Coaster 2 has to offer. And it is very exciting. I cannot wait to play with these even more. This is what Planet Coaster enthusiasts have wanted for years, and it makes me so happy that we're now finally getting it. It's absolutely unreal. I'm doing a live stream this Saturday on YouTube, so if you've got any questions about Planet Coaster 2, come along. I'll be building a cool coaster along with answering any of the questions you might have about this upcoming game. I've also just released another 2 videos today, which are on your screen now. Definitely give those a watch if you want to learn all you can about this new game. Please drop the video a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you like this kind of content. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers, and it would mean the world if you could help me get there. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.